Wine, which is one of the most delicate and complicated agricultural products, shows how climate change is changing traditions and ways of doing things that may be hundreds of years old. In this video, we are going to talk about effects of climate changes on the wine industry. So before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Smart winemakers all over the world have thought about and tried out ways to adapt, not only to hotter summers, but also to warmer winters, droughts, and the kinds of unexpected, sometimes violent events that are caused by climate change, such as freak hailstorms, spring frosts, flooding, and forest fires, to name a few. Farmers have been on the front lines, and since the 1990s, grape growers have noticed big changes in how the weather works. Some of these changes have been good for some areas in the short term. Places like England that weren't good at making fine wine in the past have been given the chance to join the global wine world, which has changed local economies. Warmer growing seasons have made it much easier to make consistently good wines in places like Burgundy, Barolo, Champagne, and Germany's Mosel and Rhine valleys, where great vintages used to be rare. This run of good luck has driven up the prices of land and wine and made farmers and winemakers famous around the world. Even though these wines are so good, they have changed in some ways because of the changing climate. In some cases, the changes are small, and in others, they are big. And more changes are coming much faster than anyone thought they would. The effects of climate change are getting worse and worse, which is forcing the wine industry, especially those who see wine as a product of agriculture rather than a product of industry, to take action to stop or adapt to the changes. So far, these efforts have been centered on 5 things that are important to growing and making wine. The map of wines is getting bigger. Grapes are now being grown in places that were once thought to be too cold for making good wines. In the past, many great wines were made at the very edge of what was possible. Grapevines seem to do best in places that are hard for them, like in poor soils where their roots have to dig deep to find water, or in harsh climates where they have to work hard to ripen. Some of the most famous grapes in the world, like Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Nebbiolo, and Riesling, grow best in environments that are on the edge. These environments allow for low yields and phenolic ripeness, which is when sugar, acid, and tannins are all in the right place to make exciting wine. On the other hand, if these grapes are planted in overly fertile soils in warm climates, the wines they make will be dull and flat, with little of the flavor and nuance that has made them so popular. As the climate has warmed, places that were once thought to be too cold are now showing that, as long as the other conditions are right, they can also make good wine. In the northern hemisphere, winemakers are moving north, and in the southern hemisphere, they are moving south. England is a good example of this. No one had ever heard of English sparkling wine before 30 years ago. But as the climate has warmed, a world-class sparkling wine industry has grown, and new vineyards are being planted at a dizzying rate, mostly along the southern coast. Fine sparkling wines are made all the way from Kent in the east to East and West Sussex, Hampshire, Dorset, and Cornwall in the west. They are made in the same way as Champagne, but have their own style. Many of the best vineyards are planted in white chalky soils that are geologically the same as the best soils in France's Champagne region. Those soils have been there for a very long time. But until recently, it was too cold to live there. Now, champagne companies like Taittinger and Dranken Pommery Monopole have invested in English vineyards to spread their risks as the climate in Champagne, which used to be very cold, has gotten warmer. Not just in England. Some of the vineyards in Belgium, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden were made with hybrid grapes that were made to grow in colder climates. Other vineyards, like a Riesling vineyard in Norway, were made with vinifera grapes, which are the same species as all the classic European grapes. Grapes for making fine wines are now grown in northern Germany and in the Canadian provinces of Ontario and British Columbia. Growers are moving south in the southern hemisphere, deep into Patagonia, in Argentina and Chile. Some of the plants are being tried out right now, but in the coming years, these areas will be looked into more deeply. Winemakers are seeking higher ground. Producers are now planting vineyards at higher elevations that were once thought to be too cold or windy to grow wine grapes. There are no hard and fast rules about how high up grapes can be planted. It depends on the climate of the area, how good the light is, how easy it is to get water, and what kind of grapes are grown there. But it's clear that as the earth has gotten warmer, vineyards are moving up. Familia Torres, a global wine company based in the Catalonia region of Spain, has planted vineyards in the foothills of the Pyrenees at altitudes between 3,000 and 4,000 feet. This is in response to climate change. Peak temperatures aren't always much cooler at higher altitudes, but intense heat lasts less time and it's colder at night than it is at lower altitudes. This increased diurnal shift, or change in temperature over the course of a day, helps grapes ripen at a more even rate and over a longer time than in places where the temperature stays pretty stable. But going to higher altitudes also brings problems. Most soils are poorer, especially on slopes, and water is hard to come by. Unexpected weather like frosts and hailstorms are always a risk. How tall is tall? It depends where you are. In the 1990s, Nicolas Catina Zapata of Catina Zapata in Argentina was the first person to plant vineyards at high altitudes in the area. He did this by planting the Adriana vineyard in the foothills of the Andes at an altitude of almost 5,000 feet. He did this not because of climate change, but because he wanted to find better places to grow grapes so he could make more complex wines. The success of the vineyard led to more plantings at high altitudes, which in turn suggested one way to deal with the warming climate. Today, vineyards in Salta and Jujuy, in the north of Argentina, are between 5,000 and 11,000 feet above sea level. This makes them some of the highest vineyards in the world. In Washington State's Walla Walla Valley, growers are experimenting at 3,000 feet, which is higher than they have ever been in the area. Climate change is also making some long-established vineyard areas look better, even though their high altitudes used to make them look less desirable. People didn't think much of the Hautes-Côtes regions of Burgundy, which are split between the Côte de Beaune and the Côte de Nuits in the heart of Burgundy, because they are at the top of Burgundy's slope, about 1,200 to 1,300 feet up. At that height, the grapes took a week or two longer to ripen than those that were planted in better places. Sometimes they came too late, and the grapes didn't have enough time to ripen. Even in the best years, the wines were always lighter and thinner. Now, the grapes ripen at the same time every year, and the wines are getting better and better. Growers are blocking out some of the sun. Some of the best vineyards in the world have been in the northern hemisphere for hundreds of years because of a formula. They would be planted on south or southeast facing hillsides with good soil, where they would get the most sun and warmth and the grapes could ripen fully. This was true in Portugal's Douro Valley, Germany's Mosel and Rhine valleys, northern France's Rhone Valley, Burgundy, and Barolo. As grapes were planted in the southern hemisphere, the slopes that faced north were the most sought after. As the climate has changed, however, winemakers no longer have to worry about how to fully ripen grapes. Instead, they have to worry about how to keep them from getting too ripe. Many growers have had to change the way they think because of this. In Australia's Yarra Valley, growers are starting to question the idea that vineyards should face north. Mac Forbes, a great farmer and winemaker, rented about 10 acres facing south in 2017. There, in Don Valley, he planted Chenin Blanc, Pinot Noir, and Nebbiolo, all of which do well in a cool climate. In the Douro Valley, low-lying south-facing vineyards are still prized for making port, which needs grapes that are very ripe. But in order to make the kind of fresh, unfortified reds and whites that are becoming more popular around the world, winemakers are looking for vineyards that face north and are higher up. Growers are using this new way of thinking all over the world where wine is made, but especially in places like California where the status of vineyard areas has not been set in stone by history. On a smaller scale, this logic also affects the way the rows of vines are set up. Growers work hard to protect new grape plantings from the afternoon sun, when the heat and light are at their strongest. What do you think about this video? Do let us know in the comments section below. If you want to hear from us again, make sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.